Record this. Welcome to the Biomystical Womb webinar. I'm Sama Morningstar, and we have a few people joining us, and I want to simply start out with a little womb meditation for us all. So you can put your hands on your womb, on your belly, and you can put your thumbs at your navel and your fingertips at your pubic bone, making a shape, a sort of a portal with your hands that's right about the size, maybe a little larger, of your womb. And if you place it right there between your navel and your pubic bone, it's not exactly, your womb kind of is tucked down in your pelvis behind your pubic bone, but it's creating a little portal. And you're giving and taking care of energy of your hands is aimed and giving and taking care of, sending that energy into your womb space and bringing your attention there. And I'm doing this meditation for me as well. So we're all bringing our attention here to our womb space. You can close your eyes. Take some deep breaths. I like to let out a ha sound on the exhale, feeling a wave of relaxation passing through me from the top of my head all the way down to my feet. So let's do 3 ha breaths. Ha. Ah. Ah. And we can imagine that we have a golden seed of light in our womb space. Each breath is nourishing that seed. That seed begins to sprout a root, passes down through the chair we're sitting on, through the floor, and into the soil of Mother Earth. Rooting deep, deep down into Mother Earth, all the way down to the core. Feeling the fiery passion for life, the generation of life, bubbling up from that fiery core of Mother Earth through our root. Vitalizing us, vitalizing our womb space, letting that fountain of vitality bubble up into our power center, into our heart center, into our throats, into our heads, fountaining out the crown of the head, into our aura with this golden vitality, receiving it from Mother Earth. Feeling that golden vitality filling every cell. And feeling the crown, our crowns blossoming. And the rich, dark potential from the cosmic womb, the black hole at the center of the universe, flowing down, mixing with the moonlight, the starlight, and the sunlight. And flowing down into our crown and filling our aura and mixing inside of us that rich, dark potential with that golden, earthy energy. And just taking several more deep breaths, feeling that wisdom energy and vital energy mixing and nourishing and flowing through us. Feeling that each of us, no matter where we are in the world, no matter when we're listening to this webinar, is a node in a web surrounding the planet. Each of our womb spaces pulsing with this vital wisdom. And just feeling that web like a spherical flower of life that we can receive wisdom and vitality from each other and give our wisdom and vitality to each other through this web. Feeling it pulsing through us as we breathe. I'd like to imagine us reaching out our hands and holding hands in a circle that spans the globe as well. So welcome. Thank you for joining me in the Biomystical Womb webinar. I wanted to share in this webinar about this body of work that has been coming through me, that I've been inspired to develop. I'll share first a little bit about my journey in womb-centered healing. Some of you may have heard some parts of this story already. It's always lovely to look back at how these inspirations were nourished by all of our experiences. And so for me, my womb-centered healing journey, or my biomystical womb journey, began prior to conception, really. I didn't discover that until later on, when I started to explore meditations and visionary journeying, and had a teacher that guided us on a soul purpose journey, where we visited the moments just before we were conceived to find our soul purpose. That was very powerful for me to go back through all the challenging aspects of my life and see how they all were serving my soul purpose. That was a pivotal point in my healing journey. And my soul purpose at that time, what I got very clearly was this sense of reunification of dichotomies, of opposites, of masculine and feminine primarily, of reweaving, of partnership and harmony between masculine and feminine energies. And And when I was looking, in that meditation and in my reflections afterwards, I was looking back on all my experiences of disharmonious relationships between men and women, starting with my mother and father, my mother and my adopted father. All throughout my life, I had abundant examples of and up close and personal experiences of the painful results of disharmony and the domination model that we have been experimenting with as a species between the masculine and feminine energies. And so my healing process around those painful experiences has been about rediscovering how to have harmonious partnership with the masculine and feminine energies within me and then in my life. So for me, specifically with men, I wanted to have a healthy relationship with a man. That was a big priority for me, and I wasn't able to do so because my programming around disharmonious relationships between men and women kept looping in my life. And I discovered early on in my 20s and early 30s, it started to become clear, and I studied psychology at UC Davis, so that gave me some information about it too, that as how we're conceived, gestated, birthed, and raised for the first, throughout our childhood, all the examples that we see in the adults around us program us. They influence how our DNA creates us in the womb, what capacities are awakened in us, and what lay dormant because the environment that we're in doesn't allow them to become awakened. And so in my 20s and early 30s, I began to realize that, my goodness, that programming that I received of very disharmonious relationships between the masculine and the feminine, between men and women, but also inner relationships between those energies, wasn't serving me. And how do we reprogram that? How do we change that? And it became very clear that those experiences of how was I conceived, right? What was the relationship like between my mother and my father, my biological father? And how did that create a blueprint for that initial moment and all the emotional experiences that they were having at that moment of my conception created a blueprint for how life was to be. Because their emotions, all the biochemicals, neurochemicals, everything that was going on deeply impacted and influenced how my cells developed from that moment onward. And what were the circumstances throughout my mother's pregnancy? And this is true for everyone. Looking back on that, and I don't need to go into all the details, but there were, very influential circumstances that had, my mother in states of stress and anxiety and various things. And that's true for most of us. And those neurochemicals were creating a soup in that amniotic fluid that influenced how my DNA developed. And I've since learned that many of us become addicted, physiologically addicted to stress hormones in the womb. And that one of the healing modalities that's helped me tremendously with that is actually warm water therapies, where we actually are in warm water with a practitioner that can help support our nervous system to revisit that being submerged in warm water. And when we have an experience where we're not stressed, where we're surrounded by, where the person holding us, their nervous system is not in a state of stress, it makes a huge shift, because physically our body revisiting that being held in warm water takes us back to that womb experience and can reprogram the DNA that back then in our womb got the idea that life was stressful and that we had to be, that we were, going to just be stressed from here on out, right? Have stress hormones coursing through us. And that was how to live. And going back to that womb-like experience in the warm water, the body says, oh, wait a second, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. And that can heal that addiction. And so these are some of the beginning places of the biomystical womb healing work, is looking at how our experiences in the womb, in our mother's womb, have affected and created blueprints for our life. And just recognizing that. And then the mystical aspect of it comes in that we're not just a physiological being coming in. We are a spirit coming into a physical form. And for specific spiritual, mystical purposes. And so that choice that we made just before conception of our life purpose, and choosing the experiences that we're having with parents that we had, and all of that for that life purpose is a big part of all of that. And that experience of being stressed out in the womb, and then learning later on in life how to shift that and turning on our capacities to live life in a different way, not in a constantly stressed out, perpetually, perpetuating that state of stress and disharmony. That is the spiritual development that we were choosing. That was the purpose. And so for me, that was definitely the case, that all of the experiences I had throughout my childhood of experiencing that disharmony, experiencing becoming a young woman, my first menarche, and not having it really honored or cared for in any way, just, being handed, deodorant pads and that's it, and being reprimanded if any blood were showing anywhere in the bathroom, right? And having that be a source of shame, and just all these details of how the feminine biological experience is, in our current culture, treated as shameful, signs of weakness, not worthy of any kind of attention besides suppression and hiding, and all these ways that we devalue the feminine biological, as well as therefore the feminine spiritual experience. And so I got to have all of those experiences as preparation for this purpose, to learn how to help this to evolve in a healthier way, and to learn what is our potential, of course, in order to have harmonious relationship between masculine and feminine, there needs to be a reverence for and respect for and a valuing of the feminine just as much as there is of the masculine. So what is that? What is the feminine? How can it be valued? And so that has started with me, and it did a long time ago, in valuing my feminine biology, my feminine sexuality, and learning how to be in harmony with that and have my life be in harmony with my feminine biology. And that's a big first step for a lot of women, particularly because we're taught the lifestyle that we're geared towards, that we're educated into, is not in harmony. It's a very masculine lifestyle, and it is not in harmony. It's about dominating feminine biology. So you're supposed to go to work all the time in a linear way. You're not supposed to take a week off a month. But feminine biology says there's a week or 4 days at least of resting that's needed. Just like the seasons, the cycles of the moon, just like the seasons of the year, there's a period of time, there's a quarter of the year, every year, in places on the planet where there's a dormant winter, where everything rests. And that's the same with feminine biology. But the lifestyle that we're trained to doesn't allow for that. And so many women have started the process, especially through this biomystical womb type of work. And I'm not the only one who teaches this. I just have that term. Is to say, wait a second, no wonder my menstrual cycle and my fertility is out of whack and isn't working properly and is causing me all kinds of pain and suffering. My life is trying to dominate it and is not treating it with respect, and is not allowing for those natural rhythms to be a valuable part of my life. And so when we start to learn about that and organize our lives around that, what we start to notice is that if we allow for those cycles of great creativity to flow into the cycles of deep rest, that those cycles generate life. That's the movement of the generation of life, the momentum of the generation of life. So everything goes in cycles like that. The sun circles around the earth circles around the sun. The moon circles around the earth. The whole solar system circles around in the galaxy. We have the 6 cycles of the seasons, and we have the cycles of our wombs. And this is what generates life. This is the energy source, these cycles, the energy source of our creativity, of life. And so the biomystical womb experience, it starts to become, oh, I'm a spirit here to be alive and to learn about life. And we start to revere and honor and organize ourselves around these life-generating rhythms and cycles. And start to learn about life, actually learn about how life works and the harmonious, exquisite beauty of how life works and how these rhythms and cycles work. And that creates that harmony between the masculine and feminine energies. And we start to see how masculine and feminine energies are part of this ecological system, this ecology, this economy of life regenerating itself. And that, there's not, that there's a harmony between those energies that we can evolve into. And so, and the first step is to honor and revere those feminine cycles. And so in the biomystical womb work, what I'm feeling inspired and called to share is my experience, as well as the experience of my, teachers, colleagues, students, mentors, of how to foster harmony in our lives with these rhythms, with this life generating rhythm, how healing that can be, and how that opens us up to our ability to experience ourselves as spirit and to experience the realm of spirit and energy in its process of fully embodying in life. So a lot of spiritual approaches or mystical experiences come from this impulse to ascend or transcend, and to get away from the suffering of life that sometimes feels like it keeps us from having a kind of spiritual, mystical experience. And so a lot of spiritual practices are all about transcending or ascending and getting away from being here. Biomystical healing, or biomysticism, says that our purpose here, being alive, is to fully embody as a spirit in physical form. That's why we're here. And that we're here on this planet in these bodies to learn about life and to learn about this and to evolve with this harmony of life, this ecology of life that's so beautiful on this planet, and that our spiritual aspirations reside right here in the microbiome in our bellies, in our menstrual cycles, in our ability to create new life, and that there's powerful mysticism in placing our reverence, our mystical spiritual reverence, in the biological processes of life and how they seem to work. And many scientists that are, looking to understand things by what we can observe with our five senses get to a point where there's something else happening that can't be observed with the five senses, and yet they can see that something is happening, that there are things happening that can't be observed, and yet we can see the effects of them. And there's all kinds of research where scientists get to that point and they can't explain what's happening, and that's where that biomysticism arises, that there is this energy, there is this spirit, there is this intelligence, there is this sentience in our intrinsic, in our biology, that I feel in biomysticism and the biomystical womb work, that's a foundation of this work. And then particularly with the womb, what that means is if there's this spirit, there's this sentience, and there's this intelligence, then our wombs being a portal for spirit to come into physical form, that's a portal with direct access to spirit, to that sentience, to that intelligence. And so as we start to recognize that and live with that in our awareness and devote ourselves to listening to that intelligence through our wombs, then that opens us up and helps us to develop all kinds of mystical abilities and experiences that were not available to us when we were trying to ignore and suppress the energies and experiences of our wombs. Whew. So in the biomystical womb body of work, we have that foundational principle that our biology has this intelligence, and that we can access it through our wombs, and that all of the cycles and rhythms, our monthly cycles, our life cycle from the moment of birth, and all of the activities that go on around our wombs throughout that, our first menarche, our first sexual experiences, how we relate to our sexuality, our sexual partnerships, how we relate to our gender, you know, how we experience our gender. And I talk about this in my work, that there's more than two genders. Okay. We talk about masculine, feminine energy, but I see that as a continuum, and that everyone of any gender has a varying amount of either one of those energies, and a harmony or a disharmony between their own masculine and feminine energies, and a unique way of expressing and living those energies. And so gender is very much of a continuum, and right there in the middle between the masculine and feminine energies, biologically speaking, every species, every mammalian species has about 4% of the population that is naturally born hermaphroditic in some way, where they're biologically not the typical form of the female, or not the typical form of the male, and there's a bunch of different variations. So there's actually, biologically speaking, there's actually 11 different ways that gender expresses itself naturally, and we're not aware of that, because our culture says, oh, no, there's only two genders, and babies that are born that way are often surgically altered at birth without even consulting the parents. And oftentimes the external genitalia doesn't match the internal genitalia, because they're often not internally surgically altered. They're just made into some kind of semblance of resembling one gender or the other on the outside, and without even checking what's going on the inside or in their DNA. and that can all be, that 4% can be a variety of different ways. And so, you know, how we relate to gender is a big part of this biomysticism, and how we relate to all of that. So our gender development is a big part of that cycle of life, and how we learn that, and what's suppressed, and what's allowed to develop, and what's nourished. And then, and all of that deeply influences our mystical experience. And it occurs to me to perhaps attempt a definition of mysticism in general. And so for me, mysticism refers to our ability to connect with realms that can't be necessarily perceived by our five senses. So many people in different traditions refer to this in different ways. So some say our ability to connect with the divine. Some say, which is another way of referring to this, intrinsic intelligence and sentience and creative energy of the universe. Another way of talking about mysticism is our ability to experience our own spirit and the spirit of others, and communicate with the spirit realm, with a sense that not all spiritual beings are actually embodied in a human form, and yet might be hanging around and participating in our human experience here in some way. So many people in different traditions talk about connecting with your spirit guides, connecting with your ancestors who may have been embodied at one point but might not be now, your descendants who will be embodied soon, but their spirits are at some point, and their spirits might be involved and around and available to connect with us now. So this idea that we can connect with, and the experience of connecting with individual spirits and then spirit in general, because there's also the mystical experience of that when we connect with spirit fully, that spirit is sort of a unified field of existence, of sentience, of intelligence, and that there's no boundaries like we have when we're in a physical form. It's like my skin ends here and your skin starts over there, and but we can have experiences of merging our spirits. Oftentimes that's an experience that people have during sexual union, and that we long for that merging of spirit that we had in the spirit realm, and that we can taste when we're connecting with the spirit realm. So these are just some aspects of mysticism that I wanted to share about. And then when we're connecting with that spirit realm, we can have access to tremendous amounts of wisdom, guidance, helping us to address places where we might be suffering or feeling alone. That mysticism can be a great source of comfort and healing for many. And so by the biomystical womb says, let's look at our biology and how that can give us access to this experience of our mysticism growing and being supported by our biology, and that as well, our experience of our mysticism can nourish and support our biology. So there's a harmonious relationship between our mysticism and our biology, which is quite different than many traditions that say you have to neglect and even abuse your biology in order to experience mysticism. And that's a sign of a transcendent approach. So a lot of mystical traditions will have people be fasting, starving their bodies in order to experience that mystical experience, even inflicting pain on the body, depriving the body of various pleasures and things like that in order to somehow be closer to God, or the divine, because there's this sense that the body is somehow separate from the divine. And in the biomystical womb work and biomysticism in general, we're seeing the body as a sacred vessel for our spirit to fully come into in order to have the kind of spiritual growth and experience that is our purpose of being here. And so that's a very different approach. And so it's all about nourishing the body and having our bodies be as vibrant as possible to be the healthiest vessel for our spirit to be in, to fully embody in. And so there's a lot of emphasis in the work of discovering the ways that our vitality was diminished, especially our womb vitality, and since our womb is the portal for our spirit to embody, and that's true whether we have a physical uterus or not. Everyone has a womb space in the body, and those who don't have a physical uterus often call that space the hara. The hara is an Asian term for this space, whether you have a uterus or not. It's called the hara. So in womb-centered healing work, sometimes we'll use that term so that the word womb, and saying, connect with your womb, can sometimes have people that don't have a physical uterus thinking, oh, how do I connect with my womb if I don't have a uterus? And so we sometimes talk about the hara, but it's the same. There's an energetic womb space in everyone. And that is the place where we can connect with our unique spirit in Sanskrit, it's called the Purusha. And it's just below the navel and back towards the spine, right about where your uterus is, if you have one, and it's right there at the center of your hara. And that's where our unique spiritual access point comes in to our body. And that's where we can connect with it. And so there we are. And there's all of these traumas that we have in that part of our body, oftentimes growing up, with the gender of female, and especially in the gender as male. And then, any trauma that we have around those gender designations that many people have, there's just tons of trauma in that area from the moment that we're conceived onward. And that can hinder our full embodiment of spirit. And so this biomystical womb healing work is about a lot of trauma recovery around that area of our body. So we look at all those phases and allow, through very nourishing, pleasure-oriented practices, we allow for any traumas that are ready to be felt and released and addressed and resolved to arise. And that brings up another something that distinguishes this biomystical womb work from other healing modalities or practices that you might be familiar with. And a lot of the transcendent or ascension-based modalities, or like deep transformation-based modalities, healing modalities, attempt to sort of tear apart the structures, the unhealthy structures, and that's their focus. And it's presented as, deep, arduous, difficult work, not for the faint of heart, and all this. And often the teachers are trained on how to, or they just have learned how to really destabilize people. And, lots of different methods are used for that. And oftentimes those methods are quite abusive. And so you're sort of tearing apart, those practices sort of tear apart already torn apart people. And my experience, and I've experienced those types of healing modalities, is they might produce radical change in the individuals, but those individuals are then dependent on those teachers to sort of piece them back together. And their deepest hurts, and I speak for myself personally, my experience of these kinds of healing modalities is that my deepest hurts went into deeper hiding to avoid being torn apart more. And so what I've discovered is that in order for those deepest hurts, which are often some of the most foundational, those ones that happen when we were in our mother's womb, when we were born, or just in our infancy, when we were the most vulnerable, and it might not even seem like a huge trauma. Like some people completely write off circumcision as not traumatic at all, and yet I feel that that's one of the biggest causes for a lot of the pain and suffering in the world, because that was a lot of men's first experience of their sexuality, was pain and violence, right? And so those early blueprints that are just written off most of the time, like being spanked as soon as you're coming out of the womb to get you to start breathing, right? Or just some of our birth practices that are very traumatic for the baby and are just considered normal. Or the trauma of the mother, the baby might not even be considered, but the mother has gone through a lot of trauma, and that is huge for the baby. When the baby's feeling all the mother's emotions, and an adult amount of it in a tiny little baby form. So all of these early traumas get buried deep inside, and those tearing apart, practices, they hide even deeper. And what allows those deep hurts to come up are practices based on nourishment and pleasure and safety and feeling like there's permission to go at our own pace and to just feel ourselves, and having our nervous system be in deep rest and relaxation mode. And that's key, because those tearing apart types of practices puts our nervous system in fight and flight mode. And so those deep hurts can't come up, because our brain waves are in that fight and flight mode. And so that's what we do, is we shove everything down in order to get through, right? And so practicing being in deep relaxation, organizing our lives so we can be in this deep state of relaxation and taking our own time and being at peace with how things are. And even if it's disturbing, there's a sense of allowal for things to come up, and nurturing ourselves, and lots of practices that we do to allow, that I do in this body of work and share with my clients and students, to allow what we're ready for to arise and bring that healing wisdom and this different way of being, this different, rewiring our nervous system, rewriting those early blueprints. And they don't have to be early blueprints. The trauma could be big traumas at any point in our lives that set a blueprint for us. And then we keep looping that same trauma, or at least the energy of it, the emotional state of it. And so in order to resolve that, there are various practices that we do throughout the biomystical womb healing process. And the womb itself, you can hear the biomystical womb healing part of that name as, okay, you can hear it as, okay, we're going to heal the womb. And that is definitely an aspect of it. We're going to bring healing energy to traumas and pain and difficulty in the womb. There's also the womb healing aspect, which is that the womb has tremendous healing abilities and power and potential. And so as we start to bring healing to the womb, we start to feel healing arising from the womb for all aspects of our lives. And in the biological realm and in the mystical realm. And so there we have it. And so that goes through our whole life cycle. So, I was talking about birth, early childhood, puberty, sexuality, reproductive years, and then of course there's menopause and the wisdom years. Okay, for any gender, there is a phase, there's a growth into coming into the time where your soul purpose can be your main focus of expression. Ideally, I would like to see all of those phases be, and they are all preparation for and aspects of our soul purpose, development of our soul purpose. And I would like to see everyone conscious of that as we go along and supported in that as we go along. But sometimes being not supported or having it suppressed is like the arrow being pulled back in the string of the bow. And then we are released, we are even more strongly released into that flight of our soul purpose carrying us forward. So thank you so much for being here with me. And let's see here. I would like to open up space for any questions that anyone might have. I have everyone on mute right now. If you turn on your video, then you can actually physically raise your hand and I can unmute you if you have a question. I think there's a button that you can push that says raise hand that will give me a notice that you would like to ask a question. You can also type your question into the chat if any of you have a question. While you're reflecting on your questions, I'll just share a little bit about my how this work that I've just described is being presented into the world. So I'm in the process of writing a book called The Biomystical Womb. And that book is going to be a combination of, it's got all of this discussion of this work, the biomystical womb work. It's also a memoir, so I'll be sharing it, intertwined, this work, these theories, these processes, these healing processes, intertwined with my memoir, my biography, if you will, as well as it will be intertwined with case studies of students and mentees, if you will, that are volunteering to be case studies, apprentices, that's the better name, apprentices who want to learn about this body of work, and their biographies, their writings about their process around this healing work, this biomystical womb healing work, will be included in the book. And it will also have a rewriting, a retelling of the stories of various goddesses, sort of a rewriting of some of the mythologies, that many of the mythologies of goddesses, like, for example, Persephone, Demeter, and Hecate. These are goddesses from the Greco-Roman tradition, have been very influenced by patriarchal belief systems. And I feel that those experiences of the feminine in our divine mystical experiences predate patriarchal belief systems and ways of looking at and mystical experiences. And so as we work with this biomystical womb healing, we can start to access those ancient memories of what these stories were like before they got painted over with patriarchal storylines. And so I'm reweaving and retelling these mythologies, these goddess mythologies, with this energy of womb reverence and sovereignty of the feminine. And so that will be woven through the story as well. And so that the book is a healing process, just reading it, because that's one of the healing, one of the principles of healing trauma in the way that I've described in this webinar, is that we need to be fully nourished and in pleasure in order for traumas to be resolved. If we just dive into trying to remember old traumatic experiences and healing it without that, we can re-traumatize ourselves. And so since we will be telling stories of traumatic experiences in the book, I'm going to weave it in with these these divine womb reverence experiences to provide something, a healing space that's called titration, where you titrate between touching the edge of a pain or a trauma and then coming back to a place of comfort and pleasure and receiving nourishment and resourcing there. And so the reading of the book will be a healing process and supported in that way with that lovely story that I'm weaving into it. And so someone posted a question of when will the book be available? That is not known right now because this case study aspect of the book. I'm a relational creator, so I get fueled for my creativity through relationships. And so as part of the book writing process and as part of the development of this body of work process, I'm starting a 9-month apprenticeship, biomystical womb apprenticeship, that starts October 31st. And I'm gathering apprentices, and some of those apprentices will be volunteering to be case studies in the book. So they will be going through the process of these healing, this healing journey, the biomystical womb healing journey, and writing about their experience on a regular basis. And that their writings, those apprentices, those case studies, their writings will become part of the book, and I'll be weaving those in. I don't know how many rounds of apprenticeship, of the 9-month apprenticeship, the 9-moon apprenticeship I will need to do. And I don't know, this is the first time I've written a book of this nature, so I'm still learning my process and what's going to work for that. The last book I wrote, it took me over 10 years to finally publish it. It was a book of poetry, but I wasn't actively engaged with it for all of those 10 years. I basically wrote the whole book, and then it just went dormant for a while, and then I published it. But this one I'm actively engaged in, and this is the focus of my life right now. So who knows how long it's going to take me to finish that book. So yeah, so I wanted to share those things in this webinar, share about the apprenticeship. If anyone is interested in learning more about the apprenticeship or becoming a case study for the Biomystical Womb book, you can go to my website, which is wombcenteredhealing.com. And there you'll find a page on the Biomystical Womb Apprenticeship, and it has lots of information about the apprenticeship, and it has information about how to get started on any of the different ways that you might want to get started. You can also become a Womb Centered Healing Temple member there, and the members, it's a monthly membership, and there's various different levels of membership. And that's another way to engage with this body of work and, start putting that into practice as well. So you can find out about all of that at wombcenteredhealing.com. So it looks like those were the questions. Does anyone else have any questions? I think I answered those questions now. Yeah, Madeline, here, let's unmute you and see what your question might be. There we go. Let me unmute you. There you go. There you are.
Yeah, thank you. There's lots of different levels and kinds of healing in the womb, and a lot of time the focus is on spiritual and emotional, which is great. I was wondering how you see this work unfolding in terms of physical healing. If people have significant physical issues, to what extent can this work help support those?
Well, I feel it can greatly support that. There are aspects of the biomystical womb work, very significant aspects of it that address that. So we do a lot of work with herbs and healing practices. It includes, the biomystical womb work includes a full womb wellness assessment, looking at current and or previous menstrual cycle symptoms that give us information about the person's overall health. Okay, and then I mentor people on how to bring together a holistic healing team. So So that holistic healing has been my life's work. I'm a massage therapist. I work closely with my acupuncturist. I'm an herbalist. And so I have ways, I've done a lot of work with diet. And so I have ways that have worked for me, for my physical health, that I can share about. But I'm not a naturopathic doctor. I'm not an acupuncturist. And so I weave wisdom that I've gained from my process in my own healing into that, and I can consult with the students and apprentices about, okay, you're going to want to see an acupuncturist, and they can help you, especially having an in-person if they're doing this apprenticeship from the distance. You might want to see a naturopath. And then we become a team, and I have a team. This idea that one doctor would be able to meet all of our needs, it just doesn't really work, especially when the doctors are doing it in a certain way that just ignores and doesn't even address our feminine biology. And so we want to gather a team of practitioners that we really feel that same level of safety and pleasure and support and validation is really important, because a lot of practitioners have this training that says that they're the authority, and that the patient or the client or whatever they call them doesn't really know about their own health, and that they're going to tell that person what they need to do. And myself, I feel like the models of care that, I'm also a doula, okay, a trained doula. So the models of care that I've learned in my studies are client-centered or woman-centered, where you are validating and listening, really deeply listening to what the person is telling you and about themselves. And I take it even a step further in saying, and bringing the emotional and spiritual side of it in, saying, can you listen to your own inner guidance about this? Because that's been influential in my physical healing process, is to say, all these practitioners are saying this thing, that thing, the other thing. What do I feel called from deep down inside to try? And then how did that affect me? And really being honest with ourselves and really listening to ourselves. And that is a spiritual emotional healing practice just by itself. So integrating the spiritual emotional healing with the physical healing, because I feel like they're roots and sources for each other, okay? And that it's totally intertwined. And so as we heal emotionally, we will notice healing happening physically. As we heal physically, we will notice healing happening emotionally. As we heal spiritually, we will notice that same healing happening in those other realms as well. So does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Can I just ask one more, just to take
Absolutely.
it off?
Everybody else had to go, so they didn't have any questions. So it's up to
lucky
you.
Me.
Interesting questions.
Well, I think in a way you've already answered it, but because of your experience and expertise, I'm really interested to discuss this with you, because obviously there's what we do physically to heal the physical womb issues, any pathology. I have very large fibroids, thanks to the hospital drugs, which I don't know what possessed me to take, but I was in quite a dire situation with hemorrhaging, and you get to a point where it's like, okay, So, but I do sort of work with emotional stuff, with tapping. So obviously I'm very aware of how that's feeding into it, and then the spiritual dimension. So in my past journey, I've seen those spiritual dimensions really able to impact on the physicality of something. So, people with tumours, they just go away.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my tendency has been that sort of ascendance thing. Oh, you know, let's go to the higher spiritual realms and zap whatever's there, you know. And I think my journey has been very much what you're talking about, coming back and learning to love and nurture and honour your body, you know, so that you're nurturing your spirituality through that womb space. Because I was very much in the other tradition of, you know, oh, well, we don't bother about body, you know, it's all about spirit, you know. And but it's obviously the womb is that portal, as you say, to those other dimensions. I don't want to say higher or deeper dimensions, but those other dimensions of connection with source and oneness. So I guess what I'm alluding to is that my hunch is that the more you nurture that physical healing, the emotional healing, and that connection with spirit, the more one is able to, you know, heal the womb on a physical level. So yeah, I just wanted, I guess, because this is the journey I'm on. I have a big healing job to do, and I guess I'm, you know, if I was honest, I would say that in my heart of hearts, I know that it's possible to heal even quite significant physical things. I've had all these consultants poking my stomach saying, that won't go, that won't shrink, the only option is taking it out. And there's quite a significant part of me going, okay, I know it's a big lump, but at the end of the day, it's only energy held in place by emotions or trauma.
Right.
So, but I guess I'm looking for people who agree with me, so that, you know, to help me, resource me on my journey, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you, and I have heard stories and of people completely. In fact, some of my mentors have done complete healing, focusing in the emotional, spiritual realm. And one of my mentors, that I actually have her book here, because I often tell clients, oh, you've got to read this book, Profound Healing.
Whoa.
By Cheryl Canfield. She healed herself from uterine cancer.
Wow.
Through the healing process that she describes, through just being with herself and observing and everything. She's a very interesting person too. She worked with Mother Teresa for a period of time, and she tells a lot of her life story in the book. And now she teaches hypnotherapy at a hypnotherapy school that it's kind of on my list of trainings to do one day, and it's not too far away from where I live. So, and she isn't either. She's fairly close by. So I actually had a session with her in person, and so I've seen and heard and that healing physical things from the spiritual level is very much a reality. And my experience is that once something becomes so physical, it's often because there are physical aspects of our lives that are involved in that, and we can support that physical healing on all by giving it support on all levels. So we're going to support it, of course, with the spiritual and emotional things. And if it were me, and I have had fibroids, they never got that large. I had one fibroid, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty much shrunk or gone, or I haven't had but I've also addressed it in a combination manner with physical practices, nutritional practices, herbal practices on a regular basis, combined with the emotional, spiritual practices. So
Yes.
that's the bio-mystical, right? It's not just mystical. It's not just biological. It's bio-mystical. And that's the thing with the womb, is that it's the portal between the spirit and physical world where they come together. And so our spirit is influencing how the physical is taking shape. and vice versa. The physical is influencing how much the spirit can embody. Okay. And so I feel for healing, my approach is to really nurture both the biology and the spiritual and the spirit and the mysticism.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think that because I've done so much work in the spiritual and emotional realms, it's much easier for me to go there and do that work. And I think actually part of my journey, well, the focus of my journey that my soul is dragging me on, and now I'm going willingly, is to really learn to love yourself on that physical level with the diet and the herbs. And I'm on some amazing herbs that have stopped everything that was problematic.
Right.
And, yeah, it's been really good, and they've started talking to me. It's quite interesting, these herbs, you know.
They have for me too. I recently, the flowers in the garden said, we've got something to say. And so here's the beginning. I have a 25 card oracle deck with a kit of flower essences of 25 essences, and they're still coming. Okay. They're just like, I'm next. We're waiting in line out here. We got some messages for you. So.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah. So I hear you with the plants, the herbs talking to you. I'm so glad that you're connecting with the herbs in that way. Well, listen, we need to wrap this up. I've got other appointments coming up here. So thank you so much for joining me, and thank you everyone who has joined us, who might be listening to the recording, everyone who joined us and is coming back to listen again later. And again, if you're interested in learning more about the Biomystical Womb Apprenticeship and possibly becoming a case study for the book, or if you just want to get more information about it and be notified when the book is available, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com and sign up to be on the mailing list there on the first page. And you can also click on the links to the different pages that will give you information about the different aspects of my work there on the website. So I look forward to connecting with you all soon, and thanks so much. Thank you, Madeline, for all your engaging questions. And that's all for now. Until next time.